To me, again, I think the political answer every coach is going, oh, it's just another game. It's not just another game. I mean, this is the game.
That time it looked like Xavier went into some kind of delay.
And now a technical foul has been given to Mick Cronin.
You know we couldn't go through this game without a few fireworks.
Yeah, I've never had a kid tell me to F off 3 times before.
And
during the game and after the game. You know who it was. Same guy it always is every game.
There are two sides to the story. There was a reason that their coach was issued a technical in the game.
Trey, I saw you walking off the court. You gave your coach a big hug. You started waving your hands in the air. How's it feel to win the Crosstown Shootout?
I mean, it feels great. I mean, it's one of the biggest rivalries in the country. And, just to be able to go 3-1 in my whole career, I mean, it's a pretty good feeling.
Brown against Burt. Brown starting his dribble. He moves in, he pops up, he shoots. Scores! Lenny Brown! Xavier wins it! The Muskies win it! 71-69!
And this
the UC Bearcats are #1 in the country, #2 in their own city!
All right, you guys probably already guessed it. This week's pod, it's all about the Crosstown Shootout. And this game, it has everything you want in a rivalry. Good teams, good players, proximity, and a boatload of history. In this podcast, we'll take a look at the top 4 Xavier games in the 1990s, and for this special feature, I brought in Andy MacWilliams, who will interview former head coach Pete Gillen to talk the 1990 and 1994 game, as well as Xavier legends Gary Lumpkin and Kevin Frey to revisit the 1996 and 1999 shootouts. Enjoy this podcast and stay tuned for more Xavier Basketball 100 Years podcast interviews.
In our efforts to talk about the great crosstown shootouts of the decade of the 1990s, we go to the man who participated in 2 of the most memorable games in the long history of the series, the 1990 game and the 1994 game. And obviously, I need to know introduction, Pete Gillen. And Pete, overall, you were 4-5 in games against the Bearcats, and especially in the Huggins years, Hugs had like NBA quality teams, and you won you were 2-3 against those guys.
Right. Now, Bob had a great talent. He was a fabulous recruiter. Nick Van Exel, and they had a bunch of guys. Banks, he was a great player from Jersey, and a bunch of other guys. They had great talent. We had tremendous talent too, but we were 2-3 against Bob Huggins' team, and against Tony Yates's team, we were 2-2. So we had some great battles, and the Crosstown Shootout and the unbelievable intensity. It was unreal. I've never seen anything like that in my experience. And I was in college basketball for 30 years, 20 years as a head coach, 10 as an assistant at different schools at Hawaii, Virginia Military, Villanova, and Notre Dame as assistants. And there was nothing like it, And I was part of the Notre Dame UCLA rivalry back in the 80s, which back then, Andy, as you know, there wasn't games on TV every night like there is now. They had games on Saturday and Sundays, and that was very often Notre Dame, UCLA, Michigan, Syracuse, Ohio State. Very few teams got on, and Digger Phelps, that was a great rivalry, and Villanova, St. Joe's, and the Big Five, Philadelphia. I mean, basketball is a religion in Philadelphia. They love college basketball. And that was a great rivalry. Providence, Rhode Island was a good, solid rivalry, in New England. And then Virginia Tech is more of a football rivalry, but it was still a good basketball rivalry. But nothing compared, in my thoughts, to the Xavier-Cincinnati rivalry in college basketball. Was unbelievable.
The hype and the media attention and the fan involvement kept building and building in the Crosstown Shootout. Through your games against Tony Yates teams, then Huggins showed up, and it went to even a different level. I know there was always in your day, there was always the Crosstown Shootout lunch, where convention center. One year they did it at the Hall of Mirrors at the Netherlands, the Omni Netherlands, and I know I was sitting at a table with a bunch of UC guys. I mean, it was bad placement. I'm sitting with these guys, and Sister Roseanne got up there and did a great prayer, but it lasted about 5 minutes. These guys were they were grabbing their rolls, and they got really upset about that. But the whole hype for the game just got bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, it was amazing, Andy. You're right. Great point. I mean, Skyline Chili, right? They were a great sponsor. So if you were a Xavier fan, you like the chili one way. If you're a Cincinnati Bearcat fan, you like the chili, 4-way or 3-way or whatever. So that was big. Cupcakes used to have that week in bakeries, the red and white icing, on these special cupcakes for Cincinnati, and blue icing and white icing for Xavier. So,
Buskin Bakery.
Yep, exactly. So the bakeries, they were all fired up. I used to put, some of the cupcakes in my pocket and walked out, try not to let anybody see it, but
Did you declare that on your income tax? All those.
I got to clear that. No, I pay for it. I pay for it. I was thinking about, trying to do a little bit of a muscle job, but I didn't. But as you said, it's an unbelievable rivalry. And the luncheon the day before, I was, 250, 300 people at least at the luncheon, and people coming from work, and a lot of them had some association with Xavier, the undergraduate or graduate school, or Cincinnati, either way, graduate school or undergraduate, their son or their daughter or their nephew went there. So it was, it's the only place in the country we have two big-time college programs, Division I in one city. To my knowledge, there's no others, that you have, other schools, you have smaller Division Is or whatever. So, and usually a lot of people in the city have some connection with either university. So it's an unbelievable rivalry, and it's continued to grow and grow and grow, and it's certainly special.
We get to the 1990 Crosstown Shootout. It was at Cincinnati Gardens. It was, I think, your 5th year in running the Xavier program, and what a team. You had the Twin Towers, Tyrone Hill, Derek Strong, a freshman by the name of Jamie Gladden who just exceeded all expectations, Michael Davenport, the point guard was Jamal Walker. You had some depth on the team also, and Xavier was a preseason top 25, and on the UC side of the equation, Huggins, it was his first year. He was playing a football player. Steve Sanders is his shooting guard. He's a pretty darn good basketball player too. But coming into that game, it seemed that Xavier had the upper hand, but Huggins showed us what he was made of, the way he put that team together.
Yeah, he did a great job coaching, while he was there. But that game, he really was outstanding. They ran a delay, Andy. They still had a 30-second or 35-second shot clock, I think, at the time. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was 35. And he used to run like a little stall or delay for 10, 15 seconds to try to shorten the game. And, he did a great job that game. It was exciting and a lot of intensity. And we had been doing pretty well those few years before he got there, going to the NCAA tournament and, doing some damage there, winning a game or two there. And Cincinnati was kind of on lean times, and he was the savior for the Bearcats and come in and, pound Xavier. And it was a great game. And as you know, we won in overtime. Brian Grant hit a shot near the end to tie it and went to overtime. He hit a stick back, and we're down 1. And Jamal Walker, we got the ball in the corner, out of bounds play, and we didn't call for him to shoot it, but he let go like about a 22-footer and nailed it. And then they got the rebound, remember, and they got the ball out of bounds quickly, got it to half court, and the guy took a half court shot and went in and out, in again, out again, fit again, and it fell off. And we won, by 1 or 2 in overtime. So it was an unbelievable game, but we were fortunate to escape. And once again, Bob Huggins did a terrific job coaching us because we had more talent in that game.
Final score in that game was Xavier 90, UC 88 in 1 overtime, and you actually trailed by 6 with 1 minute left roughly in that first OT, and Michael Davenport certainly earned his scholarship. He knocked down a couple threes, and then Jamal Walker, the three-point shot was not his cup of tea. He hits what proved to be the game-winning 3 from the dead corner, where he never roamed to the dead corner, and it was sort of like an inexplicable but positive result there.
Yeah, no, it was. It was just our kid showed a lot of courage and guts by not giving up. We're down 6, and Michael Davenport always played with a big heart. He was never afraid. He always had a lot of confidence and courage, and stepped up in the biggest game of the year in the regular season and nailed the threes. And Jamal Walker, same thing. He had a big heart. He always, he had a lot of courage and guts and hit that big 3. And we were fortunate to win. But that was a great game. very exciting, and certainly the fans and people watching on TV and in the stands certainly got their money's worth watching that Crosstown Shootout.
There was a controversial out-of-bounds play late in the ball game, and Davenport slapped the ball away from, I think it was Lou Banks. It goes out of bounds, and UC thought it was clearly their ball. Huggins went nuts. The few UC fans that were there at Cincinnati Gardens went nuts, but maybe a little bit of luck, but Xavier got the ball back, and the rest is history.
Right, Andy. I remember the play. I don't exactly know what happened. I know it was a bang-bang play. I don't know if it was off Lou Banks or not, but that's what they called it. It was a close play either way. They didn't have the replay at the time, where they replay it 600 times. And the referees, spread around and take bows. But, we got the ball and we came down and, missed the shot, ball went out of bounds, whatever, and we got out of bounds a few seconds ago, and Jamal hit that big three-pointer to win it. But, that was those games are close, those calls at the end. Once again, I honestly don't know who was off, but we got the ball and we were able to cash in and win a terrific game.
I said I was blocked out on the radio call, so I went with, it's Xavier Ball, obviously, and that's the way it worked out. Huggins was really browned off after the game, as was their athletic director at UC, Rick Taylor. They chased the referee, Ken Faulkner, who had come from their league. They chased him into the dressing room. They were very upset. The next morning, they called WLW, and Taylor went nuts on the radio with, I think, Mike McConnell or somebody about how unfair the call was. And I came off I'd celebrated all night. I had to do the morning sports. And I was called into the program director's office right after I got off the air doing the morning shift. He said, Huggins and Taylor want you to report to the Clifton campus, to Bob's office, with copies of the tape to review what you said in the game. And I said, hey, those guys can have all the copies of the tapes. They can have a whole basket full of tape. I'm not going up on their turf. They don't sign my paycheck. And, forget it. I'm not doing it. I mean,
good for you. Now, they don't pay your bills. They don't pay your salary. No, hey, it happens. I mean, it was a bang-bang play. It could have been off his foot. Once again, I honestly didn't see it. I was near it, but hey, it happens. You get good calls and bad calls. And like I said, the referee was from their conference, right? Not one of our guys.
He was a guy from the whatever conference they were in at that time, the Great Midwest or something. I mean, I'm sure Hugs worked a lot of games with the guy, and gave him a few steak dinners at Jeff Ruby's or something. And anyway, I remember the final line I said to my program director, hey, and by the way, the bottom line is we won. I'm not going up to get excoriated on their turf. Let's move on to 1994 quickly, and another game where Xavier was an underdog playing at Cincinnati Gardens, and you still had a great team though. Brian Grant had a terrific year. He later became a high first-round NBA draft choice. But all through the game, and we were concentrating on the court action, but you couldn't resist or you couldn't be prevented from watching the interplay between the huddles during the timeouts, the benches during the game. It really seemed to get nasty there between your players, your coaches, their players, their coaches. It was the level of venom in the shootout was at an all-time high there.
It was, Andy. I don't like to talk too much about it, but briefly, without pointing fingers, both teams were, once again, we're balking each other. Both benches, I guess, were balking each other. There was, a lot of intensity, and once again, it's two schools that are very competitive. They want to win. Both teams were very good, and it was unfortunate. It's a game, you know what I mean? So, it was a lot of really some ire there, and people screaming and yelling, and every call, the intensity was off the charts. So it was too bad. It shouldn't get that way, but both sides are guilty. Us and them, yelling and stuff at each other, and at the players, and players are yelling at the players, and benches are yelling at, so it was a little bit out of control, Andy. I agree, but without going into great detail and pointing fingers, no, I don't want to do that. But it was all-time intensity and, animosity.
I'm an equal arbiter in these things, but I'm going to take the Xavier side.
You are.
your coaching staff, there were a bunch of choir boys. I mean, you had Louis Orr, the gentleman's gentleman, Conti Samus, who really appreciated being at the D1 level, a great human being. And then there was Bobby Guns. Well, Bobby might have been a little suspect, but
he might have been a little feisty. He got blamed for some stuff, but he claimed that he was innocent, and he says he was exonerated in the court of law back up in Binghamton, New York, where he's from. So he claims he was free. So, but there was both benches were firing different adjectives at each other. So that's no place for that.
Were they adjectives or expletives? I don't want to get into that. I'm not going to.
No, I don't want to. We want to happy and everything. But
I know you've buried the hatchet with Huggins. That's all resolved. But Xavier won the game. That's the bottom line. Brian Grant scored on a stick back to force overtime, and then then your 3-point shooting took over, and you won 82-76 in OT. And a guy we all expected to hit those deep water wing threes, Jeff Massey, the junior college player from the Toledo area, came up big time, and Steve Gentry hit a three. Exactly.
And as your first point, Bob and I are fine now. As you mentioned briefly before, I did a West Virginia game when they played. I think it was at Duquesne. So a week before they had a game there in West Virginia, I went over there, invited me over to his house afterwards. We had a couple of beers, and we're fine now. And he's a tremendous coach, and just the rivalry, sometimes things get out of hand. But getting back to the game, it was a tremendous game, and Massey's a terrific player. Had I only coached him 1 year, but he was a tremendous player and a lot of courage. And Steve Gentry, a little bit like Jamal, was more of a penetrator and a facilitator, and could make the pull-up shot. But he wasn't a 3-point shooter, and he nailed the big three. I remember the game right in front of our bench. It was, I said, no, yes, thank you, I like that, But he's a gutty little guy, and that was a great win. And once again, they had beaten us 3 in a row, so we needed to get that one back on the ledger.
They call it the no handshake game, and Hugs refused to shake your hand, I guess, at the end of the game. I remember you came off, and you're a volatile, mercurial Irishman, and I've never seen you that mad. You actually pounded the table, and you put the UC broadcast, the radio broadcast, off the air momentarily. You did not bother our feed, thank goodness, and I appreciate that. But you regrouped. I know you and Hugs talked later that week on the phone, and the media went nuts a couple of days after the game, but everything sort of smoothed out.
Yeah, everything was fine afterwards. Yeah, we talked, Bob and I, a couple of days later, and we both said, "Hey, we're sorry. Apologize for the histrionics that we both did." And we talked, and it was amicable, and we were fine afterwards. It just that happens sometimes. In emotion of the game, you're going to get carried away. We both did. What's amazing about when we played them, Andy? There was such intensity every time we played UC, such build up to the game, as you mentioned before, such, high adrenaline. But the game afterwards, right, it was very difficult. No matter who we played, no matter where we played, it was tough to get up. So the first year we played, it's 85, 86, we played Oral Roberts the next game. Ted Owens, the famous coach at Kansas for a while, and then he was at Oral Roberts in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We played, we're down 10 in the first half. Because we were just flat, and we had won the game 3 or 4 days before, but we had no energy, and fortunately we came back and won. But that game took a lot out of us, and it was tough to get going for the next game, win or lose, because we just poured our guts on the court during that Crosstown Shootout.
And I remember the game after the 1994 no handshake game. You had a league game at Evansville, I believe. And B. Grant had a sore knee. I don't think he played in that game, and you lost by like 30, 28.
You're right.
I mean,
we got killed. Yep. Brian didn't play. Brian Grant didn't play. His knee was bothering him, whatever. Evansville's a physical team, so I guess the Cincinnati game was physical, so his knee was bothering him, so he didn't play. And we got our bell rung at Evansville. It's a big rivalry. Jim Cruz, a tremendous coach, the coach at the time. So, that happened. So that game was so big, it was, once again, the game afterwards was always dangerous, and without our All-American big guy, it was a very tough challenge playing at Evansville.
And then later in the year, I don't know if this was Crosstown Shootout, hangover or whatever, Somebody lost their mind and scheduled St. Francis of PA in Loretta, and in the middle of a snowstorm, and they were like 382 in the RPI, and there were only 381 teams, and
Andy, you're supposed to have amnesia. You're supposed to have amnesia the games we lost instead of open wounds. Yeah, I remember the game. St. Francis. My brother went to St. Francis, PA, a long time before that. My younger brother, but yeah, we played there, and it was an ice storm. We were going up the hill, on ice. We almost slid back down. And
the story was that the bus went into a snowdrift on the way back from the shootout or something, the day of the game, and you got up and said, scholarship players stay on the bus, walk-ons and Mark Smidra get out and push. Now, I don't know if that's true or not.
That sounds like a little bit of exaggeration, a little hyperbole, but I probably have something to think about in the future. My ball league team that I'm coaching. But, that was a tough game. I forget who. We were missing one player, but there's no excuse. They just played great.
Sherwin Anderson couldn't play because freshmen packed their own bags. He forgot his gym shoes, and you couldn't find the story was you couldn't find a pair to fit him up there in the Laurel Highlands or wherever the hell it was.
Yeah, no, it was a beautiful country, St. Francis, a wonderful school, but we went up there, and it's like they won the Super Bowl. It was like 200 kids on the court after they beat us. Like, we were like maybe 19th in the country or 24th in the country. We were top 25 somewhere, Andy, I believe.
You were.
You can check that.
It made their season. The only good part of that trip for me was they had excellent lima beans in their alumni buffet before the game. I had 5 or 6 helpings.
Yeah, you went to the electric chair, I'm sure, at a pregame meal. But, that was what happened was they played us a few years before. We couldn't get a date the next couple of years, so we just had to squeeze it in at the end. It was poor scheduling, but yet we had to return the game. And sometimes scheduling's a nightmare, when you're coaching. You don't have – we had some money to have guarantee games, but, we used up all that. But, that's one of the ones I try to have amnesia in. But thank you for reminding me. I'm going to have some nightmares.
Sorry to bring that up. All I remember of that game was Joe Sunderman and I following a log truck between snowdrifts for 50 miles getting to that place, and this big red flag from the log at the end waving in my face, and Sunderman played. He was into his country music period. We found the song John Deere Green on 52 different country stations during the trip.
Yeah, there's a lot of almost heaven West Virginia stuff, but but it was an experience. But they played great. We got to give St. Francis credit for that victory.
Hey, we want to thank you for joining us, and thank you and Bob Stack for really energizing the Crosstown Shootout. I mean, Stack got it going. He was 4-2. You got it going, and you negotiated Bob Huggins and his excellent teams and produced the 1990 game, the 1994 handshake game, and all sorts of great memories. And the shootout continues, and the legends and the great games continue to roll out. And certainly, you in your 9 years you were a huge part of making this into what I think is the best college basketball rivalry in the country.
So do I, Andy. It was an honor to be a part of it, and to coach at Xavier. It was an honor and a privilege to be at Xavier. And those are exciting times and some great memories, and thanks for helping me revisit them.
Big thank you to Pete Gillen for that interview, and now we are on to Game 3 of 4. This game took place on November 26, 1996, and might be the most memorable finish in shootout history. The famous call from Andy Mack, which you will without a doubt get to hear again in this podcast, when Lenny Brown stunned number 1 ranked UC at the buzzer. There was also tremendous play from James Posey and our Xavier alum, who will be walking us through this game, none other than Xavier legend Gary Lumpkin.
The 1996 Crosstown Shootout has a special nostalgia for me. I'm not going to tear up here or anything, but it was the final UC Xavier game that I had a chance to call on the radio, and the circumstances were unbelievably positive for the Muskies. They went over to UC and they played at the Shoemaker Center. I don't know what they call it now, but it's something different every year. Anyway, fine building, I'm sure. But UC was rated number 1 in the country, and Danny Fortson appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated with a map of Middle America imposed over his rather imposing physique, pointing to Indianapolis, which was where the Final Four was going to be staged. UC rated
Yep.
number 1, and everybody assumed they were going to be, they were going to walk through their schedule and certainly crush the little old Muskies in Game 2 of the regular season. Right after I read that Sports Illustrated, I canceled my subscription. I have never renewed it. To heck with those guys. Anyway, Xavier went in and played a marvelous game against UC, winning 71-69. It's called the Lenny Brown game. My son gave me a great line at the end of the game, which we will get to later. But one of the unsung heroes in this game, the point guard, a 4-year starter at point guard for the Xavier Muskies, Gary Lumpkin. And Gary, we're pleased to have you with us. And just overall, give me your memories of that maybe the greatest crosstown shootout in the 87-game history of that great event.
Yeah, well, I just remember that there was a lot of hype. As I mentioned earlier talking with you, it was a big game for me because I wanted to right my wrong from the prior year, my statement about our ranking and that we should have been the top 10, even though we were below 500. And so after playing a summer of summer league and playing against some of those guys over the summer, we felt really confident going into the game. And we knew at that time Coach Fletcher had imposed our pressure. And I'll never forget, we ran a 14 pressure, which was a full court man-to-man pressure. And our goal was to begin to use our speed. We would always say speed is power. And we figured that we probably wasn't a stronger team in UC, that we were probably quicker, that we were likely quicker, and we would use our speed as our power. So going to that game, we really tried to, do what we call, Sherwin Anderson adopted the phrase, press to the chest. And we used that throughout that year. We were really big on pressuring teams, speeding them up, causing turnovers, and, getting up and down the floor. And I think that paid dividends for us in that game because I think we eventually wore UC down. And especially guarding a guy like Damon Flint, I know our big thing with him was to make him go right. And I think he had some troubles handling our pressure. And it didn't happen really at the end of the game when Charles Williams dribbled that ball off his foot, and the rest was history.
Gary Lumpkin is our guest, and it was your sophomore year after a freshman year where the Muskies were 13-15, 8-8 in the Atlantic 10. It was sort of a baptismal, a great recruiting group. Gary, you were part of it, obviously. Lenny Brown, your buddy from the state of Delaware, D. Flight, Darnell Williams,
yeah.
And the sort of the hidden ingredient was James Posey. He was redshirted because of Prop 48, and only his second game as a collegiate. He was like the wild card in that win at UC.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. James was like our X factor. And I know that at one point, I don't remember how early it happened in the season, but I know that James decided to take the back seat and be a sixth man. And, he wanted to watch the game and see how he could come in and impact it. And, one of the best sixth men in the country. And, of course, eventually getting drafted. So James was great for us on both ends of the floor.
They always praise Bob Huggins for being a great preparer. He knew everything about the opposition. He actually recruited Posey out of Twinsburg, Ohio. And for some reason, apparently, Huggs was a little overconfident. He must have forgotten how good Posey was. Pose had he made a big impression on that game. I remember he in the full court press, he would be on the ball, and they had a horrible time getting the ball in play.
Oh yeah. James was really, with his length and his activity, on the ball and even off the ball. A lot of teams had trouble getting the ball up and down the court, and even if the ball handler got by him, his arms were so long that when they got by him, he was able to just reach behind him and poke it forward to one of us. And so we had a lot of those kind of skills also, where we would just bait him in. If we didn't trap him, generally Pose was coming from behind the back tip or poke it to one of his teammates.
Brad Redford and I were reviewing the UC roster. They were rated number 1 preseason in the country. They had a heck of a team. Danny Fortson was a was a huge, active, athletic, big guy. Bobby Brannon from Moeller High School. Darnell Burton, we mentioned him. We'll mention him later. Reuben Patterson, Melvin Levitt, the levitator, the guy who could jump out of the gym. You mentioned Damon Flint, who had a great 4-year career at UC. I mean, they really had a legitimate, top 10 roster.
Oh, they did. They definitely did. From top to bottom, they were one of the toughest teams. One of the toughest teams we faced that whole year. Absolutely.
Hey, the game was nip and tuck. You win it 71-69, but UC seemed to have it sort of under control in the last 15 seconds. The game was tied at 69, and the Bearcats had the ball, and circumstances flipped it around and gave you a chance to win the game and avoid overtime and avoid a regulation loss. I mean, there was a little bit of luck involved, but you guys certainly capitalized on it.
Absolutely. With about 15 seconds left, I remember Charles Williams dribbling. I believe he was dribbling up the left side?
It was the left side, because I was sitting right there at courtside, and he made that error. I don't know if he tried to go between his legs or around his back. He didn't need to, and it went off his shoe out of bounds.
Yeah. He was coming up the side. I remember it was right on the sideline. I don't remember exactly where I was. All I remember seeing is him dribbling up the sideline and the ball going off his foot, going out of bounds. And I actually didn't know what to think at the time. I mean, I was just thinking, like, he got to get the best shot possible. And Coach Prosser drew up our play, which was called Army. Now, generally, the play, honestly, I'm going to correct that. The play was not designed for me. Generally, in that case, the play would be designed for the guy taking the ball out. But in this case, they put Lenny in my position, so he was coming to the top to get the ball, and everybody else was flattened out.
And, you didn't even get an assist on that inbounding pass, which, I mean, obviously it didn't qualify as an assist because Lenny put it on the floor. But you were the trigger man at quarter court, as I remember.
Yeah.
And so Lenny sort of like busted the play maybe, or he got a late word from Jeff Battle on the bench. He took Darnell Burton and basically drove him down below the free throw line, and right at the buzzer hit a 14-foot floater. And you weren't at all surprised that Lenny knocked the shot down, though.
Absolutely not. That was like the second big shot that I saw Lenny Brown hit. A lot of people know that we played together. We actually played a year together in middle school. When I was in the 7th, he was in the 8th grade. We were on a 9-1 middle school team. And then his senior year, when I was a junior, when we won the state title in Delaware, we had a really close game against our rivals. And we were in the quarterfinals, actually, that game. And Lenny rose up, actually, Andy, about the same spot that he hit the free throw, or same shot that he made against UC, he made against our rival school to beat them with a little bit of time left on the clock. So they were almost identical shots from what I remember. And I knew then, I was like, man, Lenny's one of the toughest players in the clutch that anyone would ever want. And he was just determined not to let us lose that game.
It was a monumental moment. My son was a freshman at Xavier that year, my son Brian, and we had talked the night before on the phone, and he said to me, Skip and the players and maybe the healer, James Ross, the trainer, were about the only people that believed that Xavier could go over to big bad UC and beat the Bearcats in Clifton.
Yeah.
And he said, Dad, you got to come up with a memorable line when they knock this team off. And so we kicked around a bunch of lines on the telephone. He didn't want to study, so we talked about this. And he gave me like, here's one. How about UC, number 1 in the country, number 2 in their own city.
Brown against Burton. Brown starting his dribble. He moves in. He pops up. He shoots. Scores! Lenny Brown! Xavier wins it! The Muskies win it! 71-69!
And this
the UC Bearcats are number 1 in the country, number 2 in their own city.
It was his line.
Wow.
All I did was remember it, and you and Lenny and the guys gave me the opportunity with that shot at the buzzer, and Xavier won it 71-69. I tell you, it's on more people's answering service. Xavier fans, they use that. I've gotten more mileage out of that line in the last 20-something years than one man deserves. And I'm eternally grateful to you and Lenny and Torrey Bragg, T.J. Johnson, one of my all-time favorites, Darnell, Light, all those guys. That was a great moment. Wow.
One of the best moments in my life, Andy Mac, honestly. I don't think I ever played in a game like that since that time. One of the best.
You know, and Skip did a great job, both in '96 and then again in '99 when the Kevin Frey shot went in, preparing an underdog Xavier team to knock off a number 1 UC team. It was like a siege mentality with you guys, wasn't it? With Skip getting you ready to believe that you could beat this team?
Well, yeah. One of the things that Skip preached to us was we always have a shot. No matter who we play, we always have a shot. And he would always stress the fact that, God rest his soul, that we would definitely play harder than them. And he instilled that in us. We're going to play harder. We're going to play smarter, especially when it came to the UC game. And I know that there was a special type of fire with that game, with Bob Huggins being a good friend of his and all. But in that case, there were no friends. There was no liking. And we wanted to rip your head off, and we wanted to beat you. And so Coach instilled at us in every game, but definitely especially in that game.
All right, our last game on the docket took place on December 18th, 1999. Dickie V was on the call, and Xavier was an underdog once again, this time against another number 1 ranked Bearcats team. Enjoy this talk with Andy Mack and former Muskie Kevin Frey, who made some big plays down the stretch and matched UC's physical play all night long.
We're looking at some of the great Crosstown Shootout games and focusing on the 1990s in this podcast. And there are not that many games in the series that warrant the name of an individual player. And I'm thinking of the Lenny Brown game in '96, the D. Davis game in 2015, and I got to think that the Najee Marshall game will be the 2019 game of last year. But the other guy that gets his name affixed to Xavier UC Crosstown Shootout is Kevin Frey, when the Musketeers pulled what the media said was a great upset of number 1 rated UC, a team that featured Kenyon Martin. And Kevin, you sort of took over the final minute of that ball game. What a great highlight for your career.
Oh yeah, it was definitely a great moment, and I definitely get asked about it quite often. Anytime the game comes up, and anytime anybody's talking about Xavier basketball with me.
Skip Prosser used to do a great job of preparing Xavier teams for the Crosstown Shootout. He seemed to foster this scenario that it was the Xavier team, maybe the healer, the coaches, the players against the world. And what was the preparation like for this particular UC game? When you were a huge underdog, they were rated number 1. Everybody in the world had them picked by double digits, even though the game was at Cincinnati Gardens. What was the preparation like flowing from Skip to the players?
Oh yeah, Coach Skip Prosser. I mean, his preparation for any game was tremendous, and especially this game alone. Then coming in at ranked number 1, and then we had almost a whole week of preparation to prepare for it. So the game plan, was a phenomenal game plan, as Skip is always known for. And, it was really just, up to us to go out and execute that game plan.
As I remember, Xavier had a pretty big lead at the half. It was like UC wasn't expecting much opposition, or at least they certainly underrated what Xavier had to offer. The second half, though, UC seemed to get it in gear, and it was, possession by possession, a close one right down to the wire.
Yeah, in the first half, we ran a 1-3-1 zone that really took them by surprise, and really kind of forced them out of their game plan. The the second half they kind of adjusted to what we were doing. And then they were stepping up and making shots. I mean, they if you look at the roster, I mean, they had, I think it was 5 guys out of that roster that either played in the NBA or had a stint in the NBA. So it was definitely a talented roster that, really for those guys, I mean, it's just a matter for them to just making shots and settling down. But we were able to hold on and, continue the game plan. We never stopped focusing on what we needed to do, no matter what the score was, or even after that dunk off the backboard that Kenyon Martin got. Even with that and the momentum starting to switch, we never wavered. So,
Kevin Frey, our guest, we're talking about the December 1999 Crosstown Shootout Xavier victory over number 1 rated UC at Cincinnati Gardens. The final score was Xavier 66-64, winning at 66-64, but the final minute was pretty climactic. You scored the last 4 points for the Muskies in the victory.
That was it was a great moment. I definitely feel fortunate to make that last layup. Initially I had wanted to dunk it, but then I kind of tripped over, kind of got a little bit of contact, tripped on, my feet kind of got tripped up a little bit, so I ended up laying it up. With Kenyon Martin trailing me, it's definitely at times you can feel fortunate just for getting it on the glass before he's able to get up there and block it.
Yeah, I remember you going coast to coast, and you certainly had the hops to dunk it there, but discretion, the better part of value. You laid it up off the glass and in, and but preceding that, you hit the pressure free throws to tie the ball game.
Yeah, I mean that's a player's dream. I mean, you get, I don't know how many kids, I know I did, but and a lot of kids around the country, when they're outside shooting by themselves, they're pretending they're playing against the number 1 team in the country, or step up to the free throw line, and when they're practicing free throws, and say to themselves, we got number 1 team in the country, we're down 1 or tie game, and make both of these free throws and the game's over. So it really was a dream moment for me that it just felt natural because of the time that I've put in the gym.
Now, the game did not end with that final layup on your part to put X up 66-64. UC fouled, and Lloyd Price went to the line with 3.3 seconds left. And actually, Lloyd bricked both free throws, but he got the offensive rebound to save his bacon, to save being ridiculed. And then he made a great point earlier. He put up a shot off the offensive board so that the game clock basically ran out.
Yeah, I mean, that was so smart. I mean, because it really just avoided another foul opportunity and a chance to go to the line. And a couple plays before that, Ryan Fletcher took the ball out of bounds and heaved it full court to Kenyon. He got a quick, easy bucket. So there's always that fear of, them making that long pass and have an opportunity to either tie the game or take the lead at that particular moment. So it was actually smart to really, get that shot up and, so the clock will expire.
Yeah, remember, it was 66-62, and as you say, Ryan Fletcher took the ball out of bounds 94 feet away. He was a quarterback at Middletown High School and a pretty good basketball player to boot. He throws it the full length of the court, and Martin went up, grabbed it, and dunked it, and cut it and cut it to 2 at that point. Yeah. And you guys kept your cool and salted the game away. And Dick Vitale was doing the game with Dave Sims, and Dickie V thought that UC was going to win the ball game. The whole game he was, building up Huggins and UC going to the Final Four, but he cleverly changed his tune and got on their side. At the end of the game, he was all Xavier 100% of the time.
Yep, he definitely did.
And briefly, tell us what you're doing now. I know you're into athletic training and you're still in touch with the game of basketball.
Oh yeah, I have two boys that are into basketball heavily, 13 and 10 years old, and I have a 2.5-year-old daughter. So I spend a lot of my time working with my boys, and I'm also I run various basketball camps and clinics and individual skill sessions, as well as coach at the middle school where my son goes to, and help out at the local high school. So I'm pretty active in the community and with the game of basketball. It's just something that, it's always been a passion of mine, and I've loved doing it since working those Skip Prosser basketball camps.
All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed this week's podcast. I know that I did, taking a look at the top Xavier moments from the 1990s. I want to extend a big thank you to Andy Mack, Pete Gillen, Gary Lumpkin, and Kevin Frey, all legends from our Xavier community. Stay tuned for next week's interviews, which will highlight the top Xavier moments from the Crosstown games in the 2000s. Thank you so much for your support of this podcast, and look out for more Xavier Basketball 100 Years podcast interviews brought to you by Heartland Bank.